Hello, I'm Mr. Nelson's hand, and I am going to lead you in notes today. We're going to be talking about the distributive property, or, as Mr. Nelson likes to call it, multiplying it out. Below me are the notes, but before we get started, there are two words that you must know. The words are term and coefficient. So, I've hired a band, a rap group, to teach you what those words are.
What's going on? I'm a term. I can be a few different things, so you should learn. A number, variable, or a product separated by a plus or a minus. If you got it like x plus 2y plus 5z, each one of those is a term. That's me.
Last but not least, meet me, the coefficient, the number you see before a variable. Listen, I don't need a multiplication sign, cause I'm always multiplied by anything I'm beside.
Alright, say thank you to my band. Now, to get started, here are your notes. Let's zoom in. There we go. Okay, so those two words that we just talked about were term and coefficient. Alright, so pause the video, copy down the definitions. The term are parts of an expression separated by a plus or a minus sign. So we have 12 plus 3y plus 6x minus 3. So in this expression, that's a term, that's a term, that's a term, that's a term. They're all considered terms because they're separated by a plus or a minus. The coefficient are numbers multiplied by at least one variable. Okay, so in this expression, same expression, 3 is a coefficient because it's multiplied by y, and 6 is a coefficient because it's multiplied by x. Okay, what we notice about the coefficients is that there isn't a multiplication sign. You just have to know that when a number is next to a variable, that means multiplied by. So whatever y is, we're going to multiply it by 3. And that's considered a coefficient. Alright, so distributive property, the rule for distribution, we're going to say it's multiplying out. Okay, so if I tell you to multiply out, that means you're going to distribute things. When you distribute things, you give things, you distribute them evenly. Okay, so we're going to write down the rule for distributive property now. Alright, the rule for distributive property is, okay, to multiply a sum by a number, multiply each term of the sum. That sounds a little confusing, but here's what it means. I multiply a sum, so a plus b is being multiplied by the coefficient m. So to distribute or multiply out, I'm going to do whatever the coefficient is outside the parentheses. I'm going to multiply it by both a and by b. So I do m times a plus m times b. Okay, so m is a coefficient here. M and a plus b are both factors. Now a plus b right here, those are both terms. So each term gets multiplied by the coefficient. So a gets multiplied by the coefficient, b gets multiplied by the coefficient. Okay, pause the video, copy down the rule and the example, and then we'll do some more examples. Okay, first example, we have 2 times the sum of x plus 5. Okay, so in the parentheses, x is a term and 5 is a term, and 2 is a coefficient. So the rule is I'm going to multiply 2 by both the terms inside the parentheses. So what I want you to do is draw an arrow to x and an arrow to 5, reminding you you're going to multiply both of those. So 2 times x is 2x. And I transfer the plus sign. And 2 times 5 is 10. Boom, I've distributed it out. Easy peasy. Alright, in example 2 here, the coefficient is just a negative sign. Well, if you just see a negative sign, what that really means is negative 1. So it's negative 1, and I'm going to distribute or multiply it out to both terms 3x, which is one term, and 5, which is the other. So let's draw our arrow to remind us what we're doing. We're going to multiply it by that, and we're going to multiply it by this. Alright, to review, when you multiply a negative number times a positive number, it makes it a negative product. So, negative 1 times 3x is going to be negative 3x. And negative 1 times, now, here's the deal. When we deal with minus signs in this unit, we're going to revert back to our integer rule. We're always going to change it to addition by the opposite. So we're subtracting 5, so we add the opposite of 5, which is negative 5. So that's a negative 5. Okay, so negative 1 times negative 5, negative times a negative makes a positive 5. So it's a plus sign transfers over, and negative times a negative is a positive. So if you forgot the rule, I'll put this right here for you. Copy this down. This is the rule for when you multiply with positive and negatives. Okay, so you put a positive in one, you cover up the negatives with the other. Okay, so in this case, I did a negative times a negative. So I cover up both negatives, and the answer is a positive. Do y'all remember that? Okay. Alright, example 3, we have this expression. The coefficient is 1/2, and we're multiplying it, we're going to distribute it out, or multiply it out to the terms inside the parentheses. So I've got the 4x term, and I got another minus sign. Okay, so remember how we deal with these. We're going to add the opposite. It's the same thing. So instead of having a minus, we're going to add it, change it to addition, and we were subtracting a positive number, so we're going to add the opposite of that. So that's a negative. So that's a negative 2. So now we're just going to distribute 1/2 out. So draw your arrows to remind you what you're going to do. You're going to multiply out. Alright, 1/2 times 4x. Okay, so in this situation, 1/2 times 4, I don't know if y'all remember this rule, but we have 1/2, and we're multiplying it by 4. Now 4 is a whole number, so whenever we do that, we have to turn it to an improper fraction. So 4 is really 4 over 1. Top times top is 4. Bottom times bottom is 2. And 4 divided by 2 equals 2. So that will be 2x. We're going to say plus, and now we have a positive times a negative. So positive times a negative gives us a negative answer. So I know that this is going to be negative. 1/2 times 2. What is 1/2 of 2? It's the same rules down here. If you need to write it out, 1/2 times, the 2 is a whole number, so we put it over 1. Top times top, bottom times bottom, we get 2 over 2, which really equals 1. So half of 2 is 1. Alright, so in this example, we have 2x minus 6 times the parentheses, which is x plus 2. So our terms here inside the parentheses that we're going to distribute to are x and a positive 2. But remember, this is a minus sign. We don't deal with minus signs, so we change it to addition by the opposite. So really, I'm going to distribute this negative 6 to this x and this negative 6 to this 2. Alright, so that will equal, now this 2x is not being used, so I'm just going to transfer it over. Alright, I got the plus sign. And now I distribute. Negative 6 times x is going to be negative 6x. Plus the negative 6 times 2. Negative 6 times 2 is negative 12. Alright, now, in this situation, we've got like terms, meaning when I say like terms, when you hear the word like terms, that means same variables. So in this case, I have an x and an x, so I can actually add those coefficients together. So 2 plus negative 6 Remember, when we add integers of different signs, we just we subtract them and we keep the sign of the larger one. So we're going to take 2 away from 6, and it's going to be a negative integer because 6 is larger than 2 and 6 is negative. So 2 minus 6 is negative 4. X, so we just combined these two terms because they're like terms, and we just bring down the plus negative 12. Alright, now the last example. Example 5. Now this is, we're going to do the opposite of what we were doing earlier. Earlier we were multiplying out. But in this case, we've got 2 terms, 3x, and we've got the minus 9. Now remember, we're going to change this to a plus and negative. Okay, but both terms share a common factor of 3. Both of them are divisible by 3. So what I can do is the opposite. Instead of multiplying out, I'm going to divide the other direction. So I can actually factor out 3 and 9 share a common factor of 3. So I can factor out a 3. Okay, so basically I'm going to go the opposite way. I'm going to factor out a 3. Okay, so what that will look like, I'll factor out that 3. That 3 will become my coefficient. Okay, so now 3x divided by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. This is 1x, so you can just put x. Plus, now this is a negative sign, and we're factoring out a positive 3. So a negative divided by a positive is still going to be a negative. So I'm put our parentheses in a negative. And 9, factoring out a 3. 9 divided by 3 is 3. Okay. So this ends up being a situation where I can go both directions. So you could see like this, for example, and you could factor a 2 out. And if you do that, it would look like 2 times x plus 5, like this. So you got to be able to go both directions here. All right, that's all for today. Have a good night.